Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have always been seen as a shining example of Hollywood charm. Their public appearances full of warmth and wit, their interviews overflowing with playful banter, and their image carefully polished to embody the perfect blend of glamour and relatability. But beneath the glossy magazine covers and red carpet smiles, a new chapter has begun to unfold. One that challenges the very foundation of their public persona and thrusts them into the center of a storm they may not have anticipated. This is not just another celebrity rumor or a fleeting piece of gossip. This is a growing movement from a community that refuses to be overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. A community that has long memories, strong networks, and an unshakable commitment to holding even the most celebrated figures accountable. It all began with whispers in niche online spaces, small observations that at first seemed harmless or coincidental. A missed mention here, a questionable interaction there. But soon patterns began to emerge. Patterns that caught the attention of watchful eyes and stirred old grievances that had been simmering quietly for years. The tension was subtle at first, the kind of undercurrent that most people might miss, but those within the community recognized it instantly. They had seen it before in other spaces and with other figures, and they knew what it meant. They also knew that if they organized, if they amplified their voices, and if they connected with allies beyond their immediate circle, they could turn a faint whisper into a roar that no one in Hollywood could ignore. As the weeks passed, the conversation grew louder, no longer confined to private messages or small group discussions. It spilled into public forums and social media feeds, where influencers, journalists, and casual observers began to take notice. The tone of the discussion was not one of idle speculation, but of determination. Every word, every post, every shared story carried the weight of lived experience and the desire for meaningful change. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone. Here were two celebrities who had built an empire on being relatable, on championing causes, and speaking out for what was right, now finding themselves on the receiving end of the same kind of public accountability they had often praised in others. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Would they acknowledge what was happening, or would they try to ride out the storm? And in this particular storm, the winds were strong, and the people steering it were not afraid to push back harder if they felt ignored. This is a story about perception, about power, and about the fragile balance between public image and genuine connection. It is about what happens when a celebrated couple known for controlling their narrative faces a challenge from a group that will not be silenced. And it is about how quickly admiration can turn to outrage when trust is broken. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, once seen as a golden pair of Hollywood, now find themselves at the center of an escalating situation that has grown beyond the usual celebrity chatter. What began as quiet murmurs has developed into an undeniable storm, one that draws in not just entertainment reporters, but influencers, activists, and an entire online community that feels personally invested in the unfolding events. It all started with subtle signals and minor shifts in tone, small moments that to an outsider might have seemed harmless, but to those paying attention hinted at something larger beneath the surface. A missed acknowledgement here, a seemingly dismissive comment there, and a pattern that began to form over time. As these moments stacked up, it caught the attention of a passionate network of individuals known for their ability to rally around shared causes and protect their own. This group is diverse, connected, and deeply committed to their values. When they detect what they perceive as a slight or disregard, their collective voice becomes a force capable of reaching millions. Their discussions often happen in digital spaces away from the curated headlines of mainstream outlets. Yet their influence can shape narratives across platforms in ways traditional media cannot match. At first, there was speculation about whether the couple had simply made a harmless oversight, perhaps an unintentional misstep in a world where public perception can change quickly. But as more information surfaced from posts, interviews, and industry whispers, the conversation shifted from curiosity to frustration. The community began dissecting every appearance and every public statement, looking for clues and connections that might explain the growing tensions. Some pointed to past collaborations and the way certain relationships were portrayed in the media, noting how these interactions may have contributed to lingering misunderstandings. Others referenced events where the couple seemed to sidestep opportunities to acknowledge or support issues important to this group. The frustration was not about one isolated incident, but rather a collection of moments that, when viewed together, suggested a deeper pattern. The couple, meanwhile, continued their public engagement, smiling for cameras and delivering their trademark witty banter. But those on the other side of the conversation saw these appearances differently, interpreting them as tone-deaf or detached from the concerns being raised behind the scenes. Discussions were taking place among organizers, content creators, and advocates, all strategizing on how to bring attention to their perspective. They understood the mechanics of online mobilization. The importance of timing and the power of coordinated messaging hashtags began to surface, crafted to draw attention without crossing into hostility. A stream of carefully chosen posts, videos, and articles started circulating, painting a picture of a couple out of touch with a vital community. This shift in tone was subtle, but powerful, because it was not driven by tabloids chasing scandal, but by individuals with lived experience and credibility among their peers. As the days passed, more voices joined in sharing personal stories and connecting them to the larger conversation. These narratives gave the situation emotional weight, transforming it from a celebrity news cycle into a cultural moment. It was no longer about whether Blake and Ryan were likable or successful. It was about whether they understood and respected the people who had once been among their strongest supporters. Industry insiders began to take note, some quietly reaching out to gauge the mood, others publicly aligning themselves with the movement. The entertainment world thrives on relationships and alliances, so the sight of professionals hesitating to engage with the couple was telling. In Hollywood, a pause in support can speak louder than outright criticism. The couple now faced a delicate balance. They could choose to address the concerns head-on, acknowledging missteps and seeking to rebuild trust, or they could continue with business as usual, hoping the storm would pass. But the nature of this particular community made the latter option risky when trust is damaged. Here, silence is often seen as dismissal, and dismissal can solidify opposition. Those watching closely could sense that the momentum was building in the communities online. Hub strategies were discussed for keeping the issue in the spotlight, ensuring it would remain relevant in news cycles and social feeds alike. Creators collaborated on joint projects, interviews were arranged, and op-eds were pitched to outlets, willing to carry the story beyond niche spaces. The message was clear: this was not going away on its own. At the same time, the couple had upcoming commitments, promotional tours, interviews, and appearances, each one now a potential flashpoint. Every word, every gesture, every choice of project could be interpreted through the lens of the controversy. Fans who once flooded comment sections with heart emojis now posted pointed questions asking for clarity and accountability. Even those still supportive of the couple found it harder to defend them without addressing the core issues being raised. This change in atmosphere was noticeable to anyone tracking the conversation over time, and it hinted at a larger shift happening in celebrity culture. The idea that image alone could shield public figures from sustained criticism was being tested. The couple were not without their allies, and some in their circle worked to counter the growing narrative through positive stories and behind-the-scenes outreach. Yet the scale of the movement made such efforts challenging, especially when each counterpoint was met with detailed rebuttals from those leading the pushback. It became a public relations chess game, with each side trying to anticipate the other's moves and the audience watching every play unfold across multiple platforms. For those inside the community, the goal was not simply to call out perceived missteps, but to create lasting change, ensuring that the concerns being voiced were addressed not just in words, but in actions. They understood that real influence came not from one viral post, but from sustained collective effort, and they were prepared to continue for as long as necessary. This persistence was perhaps the most underestimated aspect by the couple and their team, because while Hollywood often moves on quickly to the next story, this community was built on resilience and the ability to adapt their message to keep it relevant. The question now was not whether the couple could ride out the storm, but whether they could adapt to a reality where their relationship with this group would never be the same without genuine effort to rebuild what had been damaged. As the narrative evolved, more layers emerged, connections to past events resurfaced, and conversations about broader industry issues found their way into the dialogue. It was becoming clear that this was about more than two celebrities and one community. It was about the evolving expectations placed on public figures and the growing power of organized voices in shaping cultural conversations. The turning point in this unfolding situation came when a high-profile event placed Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds directly in the spotlight alongside representatives from the very community now voicing their concerns. The event had been planned long before any public tension emerged, but by the time it took place, the undercurrents were impossible to ignore. Cameras captured every handshake, every glance, and every moment of interaction between the couple and those present from the community. Observers both in person and online analyzed the footage in real time, sharing clips on social media and dissecting body language for signs of sincerity or avoidance. It was a reminder of how closely public figures are watched when controversy surrounds them. Some viewers noted moments where the couple appeared engaged, listening attentively and smiling warmly. Others, however, interpreted these same moments as overly rehearsed or strategically performed for the cameras. This divide in interpretation only fueled further debate, with each side drawing on the same material to support entirely different conclusions. The event itself was intended to be a celebration of creativity and collaboration, yet it became a microcosm of the broader narrative. Unfolding around the couple, every interaction seemed loaded with meaning. Every exchange of words or expressions became a data point in an ongoing discussion that refused to fade away within hours. Clips from the event were trending across platforms. Accompanied by commentary from influencers, activists, and media outlets, the community at the heart of the controversy used this opportunity to reaffirm their concerns, framing the footage as evidence of the couple needing to address the underlying issues more directly. The speed and coordination with which these narratives spread demonstrated the level of organization behind the movement. It was clear that this was not a loose collection of individuals, but a well-connected network capable of amplifying messages at a scale rivaling traditional press outlets for Blake and Ryan. This meant that any attempt to control the narrative required a level of responsiveness and transparency that few celebrities are accustomed to maintaining. The following days saw a series of public appearances by the couple, each one generating its own wave of analysis. A promotional interview for an upcoming project became a focal point after a host asked a seemingly innocuous question that brushed against the edges of the controversy. The couple handled it with their characteristic humor and charm, deflecting toward lighter topics, but online audiences were quick to point out what they viewed as a missed opportunity to address the concerns. Head-on, this pattern repeated itself as they moved through their schedule, each appearance becoming a litmus test for whether they were willing to engage meaningfully with the community in question behind the scenes. Industry insiders speculated about the advice the couple were receiving from their public relations team. Some suggested that their current strategy was to minimize attention on the controversy by avoiding direct engagement, hoping that media cycles would naturally shift to other topics. However, this approach clashed with the reality of a motivated and organized group, determined to keep the issue alive through constant discussion and content creation. The internet allows for a continuous flow of conversation, and this community had mastered the art of keeping a topic relevant. They employed a mix of personal testimonies, data-driven arguments, and cultural analysis to keep the conversation both emotional and intellectually engaging, making it harder for outsiders to dismiss as mere gossip. Even those who were not deeply invested in the original conflict found themselves drawn into the dialogue as it intersected with broader questions about representation, responsibility, and respect in public life. As the weeks passed, the situation began to affect the couples, brand partnerships, and potential collaborations in subtle ways. While no official statements were made, certain projects rumored to be in development were quietly put on hold. Potential partners weighed the risk of association with public figures embroiled in a dispute with a passionate community. These shifts in the background signaled that the consequences were not limited to social media discourse, but were beginning to touch the business side of their careers. Meanwhile, members of the community took care to frame their actions not as an attack on the couple, but as an effort to hold influential figures accountable to the values they claimed to support. This framing was important because it allowed them to maintain moral high ground while continuing to apply pressure. The narrative was not about destroying careers, but about pushing for meaningful acknowledgement and change. Within this context, the couple faced a narrowing set of options. They could continue on their current path, hoping the controversy would fade, which seemed increasingly unlikely. They could issue a general statement addressing the concerns, though risked criticism for being vague. Or they could take the more challenging route of engaging directly with representatives from the community in a transparent and public way, The latter option, while potentially risky, offered the best chance of rebuilding trust, but it also required a willingness to be vulnerable and to admit to possible missteps, something that many public figures find difficult to do in a culture that often punishes perceived weakness. As this stalemate persisted, journalists began to take a deeper interest not just in the current events, but in the history between the couple and this community. Archival interviews, past social media posts, and even old press clippings were revisited and analyzed for signs of earlier tension patterns began to emerge that suggested this was not the first time the relationship had been tested, but rather the most visible example of a long-standing disconnect. The revelation of this history added another dimension to the narrative, making it harder for the couple to present the situation as a misunderstanding born of recent events. Instead, it began to appear as the culmination of years of small but significant moments that had eroded mutual goodwill while the couple still enjoyed significant support from fans. The balance was shifting. The online conversation was no longer dominated by lighthearted memes and affectionate tributes. Instead, it was a battleground of competing narratives where each piece of evidence, each statement, and each public appearance was scrutinized for what it revealed about their values, priorities, and respect for others in this climate. Even silence spoke volumes, and every choice to remain silent was interpreted as a deliberate stance by those following closely. The fact that the couple had built much of their public image on being approachable and in touch with ordinary people only intensified the disappointment expressed by members of the community who had once counted themselves as admirers. Now they questioned whether the relatability they had admired was genuine or simply a well-crafted brand identity. This was perhaps the most damaging aspect of the controversy, because once authenticity is questioned, it becomes difficult to restore, no matter how many positive gestures follow. The growing awareness of this reality created a sense of urgency among the couple's advisors. Yet it remained unclear whether that urgency would translate into decisive action before the situation escalated further. The ripple effects of the controversy began to reach corners of the industry that even the most seasoned observers had not anticipated. Casting directors, producers, and brand executives quietly reassessed the potential benefits and risks of collaborating. With Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds in the current climate, while both remained major draws with proven track records, the atmosphere surrounding them had shifted enough to make cautious decision-makers think twice. The entertainment industry is built on public perception, and in a business where the audience can determine the success or failure of a project, such perception carries enormous weight. Whispers began to circulate about meetings where the couple had been discussed not in terms of talent or skill, but in terms of the online conversation that seemed to shadow them everywhere they went. Industry veterans noted that this was a stark departure from the usual chatter about scheduling or creative vision. Instead, discussions focused on whether the controversy would overshadow any potential work they might take on. At the same time, the community that had been the catalyst for the current situation showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, they had grown more organized, pooling resources to fund campaigns, create high-quality content, and reach out to journalists who might be interested in covering the story from new angles. These efforts ensured that the topic stayed in circulation and that fresh perspectives kept emerging, preventing the conversation from becoming stale or repetitive. Their strategy was not to rely solely on outrage, but to weave the controversy into broader conversations about values, representation, and accountability in public life. This approach broadened their reach, attracting allies from other communities who saw parallels with their own experiences and struggles. What began as a conflict between a celebrity couple and one group had evolved into a touchpoint in larger cultural debates about the role of influential figures in shaping societal attitudes. Meanwhile, the couple themselves continued to navigate their public commitments, attending events, giving interviews, and engaging with fans. However, the energy around these appearances had changed, where once there was an effortless rapport between them and the public, there was now a sense of careful calculation. Each interaction seemed designed to project positivity without inadvertently sparking further controversy. Even so, the scrutiny was relentless, and small moments that might once have gone unnoticed were now seized upon by commentators, dissected for hidden meanings, and shared widely across platforms. In one instance, a short video clip of the couple at a charity gala circulated online with contrasting interpretations. Supporters praised their graciousness and charm, while critics pointed to what they described as dismissive body language towards certain guests. This constant tug-of-war over perception placed them in a difficult position because the same act could be praised by one audience and condemned by another. The ambiguity of public interpretation meant that no gesture was immune from being reframed in the context of the ongoing dispute. Behind closed doors, it was reported that the couple and their advisors were weighing whether to take a more direct approach. Some argued that transparency and engagement could help rebuild trust, while others feared that opening the conversation might lead to further criticism, especially if they were not fully prepared to answer difficult questions. This debate within their inner circle mirrored a larger discussion happening across the entertainment world about how best to respond to organized online communities. The old model of waiting for controversies to fade was proving less effective in an era where such communities could sustain attention indefinitely. The power dynamic between public figures and audiences was shifting. Audiences were no longer passive consumers of celebrity narratives. They were active participants shaping the story in real time through their own platforms and networks. This shift meant that even the most carefully crafted public relations strategies could be challenged, reframed, or even overturned by a determined group with a clear message in the case of Blake and Ryan. The message from the community was clear. They wanted acknowledgement of their concerns and concrete action to address them. Anything less would be seen as insufficient as this. Standoff continued. The couple faced growing speculation about its potential impact on their personal and professional lives. While some fans remained steadfast in their support, others expressed disappointment and a sense of betrayal, feeling that the couple had failed to live up to the values they publicly espoused. This erosion of trust did not happen overnight. It was the result of cumulative moments where expectations were not met and where opportunities to build bridges seemed to be missed the longer the situation persisted without resolution. The more entrenched these perceptions became, adding to the challenge of changing the narrative industry. Observers noted that the couple still had opportunities to turn things around, but doing so would require more than a single public statement or photo opportunity. It would demand sustained engagement and a willingness to listen genuinely and act accordingly. Such a shift would not only help repair their relationship with the community, but could also serve as a model for other public figures navigating similar challenges. However, the decision to take that step lay entirely with the couple and their willingness to prioritize long-term trust over short-term comfort. As the weeks turned into months, the controversy became a fixture in the online ecosystem, with periodic surges in attention triggered by new developments. Whether it was a resurfaced interview, a leaked behind the scenes clip, or a fresh op-ed from a community leader, each spark reignited discussion and reminded the public that the matter was far from resolved. These surges ensured that the couple remained linked to the controversy in the public imagination, making it harder to pivot attention back to their professional achievements. The persistence of the story also revealed the limitations of traditional celebrity management in an age where grassroots networks can rival corporate media in reach and influence. For decades, celebrity culture operated on the assumption that fame conferred control over the narrative. But this episode was proving that narrative control was now a shared space, one where audiences had as much, if not more, say than the celebrities themselves. And the community that Blake and Ryan had found themselves at odds with understood this dynamic better than most. They leveraged it skillfully, keeping the conversation alive without allowing it to become repetitive or predictable, ensuring that it continued to resonate with new audiences and adapt to the shifting currents of online discourse. This adaptability was perhaps their greatest strength and the factor that made the controversy so enduring in the end. The situation facing Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds is not just about one disagreement or a handful of controversial moments. It is about a shift in the way public figures and communities interact in a world where voices once marginalized can now reach millions instantly. The couple have found themselves at a crossroads where their next steps will define not only their relationship with this particular community, but also their standing in the broader cultural landscape. The community that challenged them has shown remarkable unity and determination, turning personal concerns into a movement that resonated far beyond its original boundaries. They have proven that with focus and persistence, even the most carefully managed celebrity images can be questioned, reframed, and reshaped in real time. For Blake and Ryan, this is a pivotal moment to decide whether to engage meaningfully and rebuild trust, or to remain silent and risk allowing the narrative to be defined entirely by others. The lesson here extends beyond the individuals involved. It serves as a reminder that influence in the digital age comes with heightened accountability. The audience is no longer passive, and the conversation does not end when the cameras stop rolling. If anything, that is when it truly begins. The power to inspire can quickly become the power to disappoint. And once trust is fractured, it takes far more effort to repair than to maintain. Whether the couple can navigate this challenge successfully remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the community they underestimated has shown they will not fade quietly into the background, and their resolve will shape the outcome of this story for a long time to come.